Mr. Kaberuka, thank you very much. It's a great way to start this next session, and I take away your main point that digitalization is more than just using mobile phones. Join me in welcoming the panelists for our next session. We have Mr. David Malpas, President of the World Bank Group, Mr. Tony Elumelu, Chairman, Heirs Holding and United Bank for Africa, Ms. Runa Alam, CEO, Development Partners International, and Mr. Nick Reed, Group CEO of Vodafone Group.
I'll come toward you.
Thank you very much. And if you'd like to ask our panelists a question at the end, please refer to Slido in the Summit app to post your questions. So, Mr. Malpas, I'll start with you. In which sectors do you see the most promising opportunities to turbocharge jobs-rich growth in Africa?
Thank you, Lucy. When you said turbocharge, I thought of electro-impulsive lightning bolt. I had to write it down to remember. So we're scrapping turbocharge and we're going for the electro-impulsive lightning bolt. So I think there's big opportunities when countries change their policies and make an attractive investment climate. And there are investors who will try to seek that out. One of the areas that I think can be most valuable is digital financial services because it empowers and enables small businesses, women, people that haven't been in the economy to actually get into to have money, to have it kept safe, and then to use it the next day and the next day. Our old systems were dependent on physical money, which was very hard to protect and to share within a community and so on. So I think there's good opportunity there, but that then requires more availability of electricity, more availability within the country of regulatory policy that allows some flexibility in the system. You know, the regulatory policies are set up for the old system, which was dominated by banks, often a state-owned bank, and it's just been very hard for those institutions to update themselves. So I think there's good opportunity. I'll mention that one as turbocharging.
Sounds great. I like your reference particularly to power, because we know that sub-Saharan Africa actually consumes less power than Spain, was the last statistic I recall reading. So we were talking about financial services, digitalization, but we need power for all of that to come to life. Thank you very much.
I was sitting at lunch beside the president of Malawi, and he was saying the penetration is only 14%. Wow. He has a goal of doubling it. I think that's commendable, and I think it's urgent that there be thought given to how do you rapidly expand the availability of electricity.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. If I can switch to you, Mr. Elumelu, from your experience as a successful investor, what do you see as the main growth sectors in Africa today, and how can governments across the continent really empower the next generation of African entrepreneurs?
I think first, I want to commend the UK government for this platform, for us to interact amongst ourselves and with people who are interested in investing in Africa. Africa needs massive private capital to enable us drive the sectors that will help us develop the continent, especially sectors like power. You know, access to electricity is very critical if we're serious about developing our continent. And sitting with the World Bank president, Runa, who invests significantly on the continent, I think we can start discussing about to bring more capital to the continent. Basically, we have huge youth population in Africa, and I think that is our biggest resource as a continent. And so to talk about the development of our continent, we must prioritize this segment and also talk of how to empower them. Empowering them is very critical in developing our continent. That is what will help us to create jobs, help us to alleviate poverty. And I think that empowerment must start from creating the enabling environment, from making sure we have roads, we have mass transportation system, and most importantly, as I said earlier, that we're able to fix electricity on the continent. If we do all of this, and we'll unleash the enormous potential that reside in Africa and these young people. It is very, very, very important that this sector, this segment is given all the attention and condition we need to give. There are other sectors, economic sectors like manufacturing, very important, petroleum sector, very, very important, that we need to also address if we must develop or catalyze or increase the development of our continent. But most important of it all is our young ones, so that they get the economic opportunities that some of us got. They get the economic hope and encouragement that will enable them to utilize and put to use what they've been studying and what they are capable of doing. This is what we do through the Tony Elumelu Foundation. We try in our own limited resources to support the next generation of African leaders, the next generation of what we call the future of Africa, giving them the enablement, giving them seed capital, providing mentoring for them, providing business education and training for them, so that they can, or we can, have our own Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, come out of Africa. Those are the things that will help us change the continent. Those are the things we need to prioritize and emphasize as a continent.
Thank you very much for that. In fact, I really latched on to where you said, creating opportunities for them like we have. I recall before this summit, a young man from Rwanda sent me a message saying, well, Lucy, what's this summit going to do for us? Because it's all well and good for people like you. You're all there, you have great education, and you're bound to do well in life, but then what happens to me? And I hope that young man is listening today and heard exactly what you said, because it is really about creating opportunities for that generation as well. Thank you. Ms. Allen, so like Tony, you've been investing successfully in Africa for at least 20 years. And with new tech and transforming new markets, how can government support investors to take advantage of the opportunities and manage risk? We heard a bit from the president of Ghana earlier on, talking about perceived risk. Mm-hmm. So there is perceived risk, but there is what is actual, which may not be the same things. So can you respond to all of that, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. So we've talked this morning about innovative finance. We've talked about impact investing. So I want to tell you a model that is not started last year, but about 20 years ago. And that is the model that the CDC and other DFIs developed, which is using a Western financial structure called private equity and adopting it to Africa. So for 21 years, I've been investing through private equity funds. When we started, it was all about, can you please not lose our money? Can you do a demonstration effect? Because we all know the largest part of money rests in the private sector, so they will follow when they see their returns. Can you also provide hands-on help to coach and help management, bring in new technologies, bring in ideas of lean management, of different types of strategy, of new product development? And so that model is what we've been investing in for 20 years. Now there's billions of dollars that have gone into Africa to support companies small and large. We happen to be in the larger part of the sector, but it is a model that is very current as well as very old. What do I mean by that? So for 20 years, the DFIs have put in our contracts that we must do ESG. So we've been doing ESG for 20 years. We've kept track of job creation, supply chain changes, and et cetera, et cetera. So impact and ESG are not 5 years old in Africa. They're more than 20 years old. And we've been doing it. It's not been ticking the boxes. So how is it new? Well, the same model is allowing us now to focus on SDGs, the UN SDGs. Job creation, of course, as Tony and others have talked about, is hugely important. We have a young population, and we know in Africa, 20 people are supported by a single job. So we can continue to do that. It happens to be SDG 8. SDG 5, which is gender balance. We are introducing toolkits to make all of our companies gender balance in Africa. SDG 13, climate change. You put that in also, and it's actually a commercial return as well as a common good. The commercial return is if you don't look at the risk of climate change, your manufacturing company may run out of water, which may be one of the ingredients. On the other hand, if you don't measure and take down energy efficiency, then we have not done something right in the world. McKinsey said in Africa, the best companies have something different. If you want to attract the best talent, you have to not only give them a good job and be a good company, but they have to feel, as do many of the younger people worldwide, that their company is doing something good, so we can attract more people, better people for ourselves. Getting to the risk, having said that, one of the biggest risks we've seen continent-wide, but it's a risk in all emerging markets, it's FX. So if the currencies keep going up and down, and you're sitting in the US or in the UK or other parts of Europe, Middle East, etc., and you're a dollar investor, you're going to worry about a great return in Africa, but what is our return? Let me tell you, despite 80–90% devaluations, we have had in dollars 5–6 times cash on our money. We've had 30–80% IRRs in our companies. We've had in the banking sector, and we invested with Tony, from 2.5 to 3.4 times our return. These numbers stack up anywhere else in the world. So what would I say? FX is important. The only thing I would ask is please devalue sooner, because if you don't, your companies in your country run out of foreign exchange, and it hinders growth. I would also say, secondly, one of the risks which Africa's been very good at is keep creating the enabling environment. There's a sense globally that's changing. Let's not have it change. I would also say, in terms of climate change, I don't think of that as I think of that as a risk. So please, in your countries, make it easier to bring in renewables, to put in things in companies that deal with climate change as well as other impactful things. And finally, I would say, whatever the policy is, I believe in regulation, but good regulation. Please make it very clear and very consistent. With that, I think Africa will grow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive response. Mr. Reid, good to see you again.
You can call me Nick.
The digitization of the economy is paramount. I don't think there's anyone in the room that questions that. If we really want to transform African economies, then we need this. But what are the key building blocks to achieve this? This is nice to say, but what do we actually need to do about it?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that digitization is a key engine of growth, that it can drive economic prosperity, and importantly, can improve all lives of people in Africa. I think we have a one-time opportunity to really do a step change in the level of competitiveness and in terms of productivity. In fact, the UN Broadband Commission estimates that a 10 percentage points movement or increase in broadband penetration can drive a 2.5% improvement in GDP per capita. So I believe the opportunity is significant. Vodafone has been operating in Africa for over 25 years. We operate in 8 markets. We've really gone through 2 transformations. One is mobile communication. We have 170 million mobile customers, but also in terms of mobile financial services with M-Pesa, which we are deeply proud of, and have 37 million customers using M-Pesa, processing 11 billion transactions worth $135 billion a year. So significant presence, and we're very passionate about Africa. I would say what's really important, to your point, is to develop going forward. I think it needs a private-public partnership. We need to work together specifically on 4 critical areas. The first is to overcome the sizable infrastructure gap. It's estimated by, again, the UN Broadband Commission that between now and 2030, we need an investment of $109 billion to ensure universal broadband access. And that's not going to come from governments. That's got to be a blend along with private investment. Vodafone's been investing about $1 billion a year on average over the last 3 years into Africa. We now have 4G coverage in all of our markets, and we're now starting to think about 5G moving forward. It's really important we have the right regulatory framework to ensure a pro-investment stance moving forward with certainty. I'd say the second thing is we need to use data to essentially provide transformational services. We have lots of examples, but if I was going to pull out one, it'd be Safaricom with DigiFarm. Here's an effort by us to create a technology platform, free, open to smallholding farmers, giving them information, pricing, and the ability to raise credit to ensure that they can develop their businesses. Third is to continue to drive financial inclusion. M-Pesa has been hugely powerful. It can do so much more going forward, and we really encourage you to put the right regulatory frameworks in place. And then finally, fourth, I think we need to use the power of digital to increase access to public services. We're looking at lots of user cases, but again, if I was picking one example, in South Africa, we're working with schools and universities to put the syllabus onto eSchool platform, 0 rated, so that we're encouraging the skill development that's required for the future of Africa. So what I say is, let's use private-public partnership as a model moving forward, really to see the full potential of realizing a digital society for Africa.
Thank you very much for that. And I'm going to feed off your point about skills development and pose a question to you, Mr. Malpas and Mr. Elumelu. For a couple of for some of the countries who have been present at this summit, they do have a challenge of growing, and yet that growth not being evenly distributed across the country. So you have a 2-speed system where some people are benefiting and some people are being left behind. Part of it is the skills challenge, that if you just don't have the skills to participate, you can't really reap the benefit. My question to both of you is that, what else can be done to really start bridging and closing this gap? Whether it's from the investor point of view, whether it's from a government point of view, whatever point of view you take, in addition to giving people skills, how do we accelerate the closure of this gap?
There's a huge gap, and it's we calculated in terms of the Learning Poverty Index, which the World Bank has put out, which measures is their literacy at age 10. And that turns out to be a very important building block for skills later on. But I want to turn also, I think we can look for tech kind of based solutions, but when you get right down to it, the goal is to have a legal and regulatory framework that encourages jobs, that encourages business investment. And that's what's often missing right now. That means transparency in contracts. So one of the biggest challenges is contracts that have non-disclosure clauses or that are not disclosed as far as what the terms are. And so then the people of the country don't see the benefits coming from the investment that might be out there. So then that becomes a circular process with not enough money for education. So I really want to put emphasis on that starting point of legal and regulatory framework that invites investment, because then the companies will want to be seeking trained, skilled workers and will actually provide a lot of the job training. That gets into girls staying in school. One of the themes of this conference is 12 years in school for girls, and having that be beneficial to the family. One of the things is to try to create a structure or an environment where the family wants the girl to stay in school rather than other alternatives. And so I think that's really important to push forward.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I have first-hand experience of the scenario you painted. We operate in 54 African countries. On the business side, we operate through United Bank for Africa in 20 African countries. We interact with people. We have over 20 million customers in this country, so we'll see the kind of inequality you're talking about. On the philanthropy side, the Elumelu Foundation operates in the 54 African countries where we try, within our limited resources, to impart our young ones. Again, we see the inequality that exists in our society. And I think, speaking from one's experience, that this best way to address this is for us to give economic hope and opportunity to our young people. It's for us to intervene directly, and in my viewpoint, not even through governments, to see how we can cut through the chase and intervene directly in the young ones. This is our advocacy. This is what we preach everywhere. If you look at the intervention we've had since 2015, where we've so far been able to assist or impart directly about 9,500 lives across the 54 African countries, it presents, in my viewpoint, an insight into what we should be doing in the 21st century as Africans and as the global community interested in the development of Africa in a sustainable fashion today. During lunch, I interacted with some, I guess they must be in audience. Some people just walked up to me. We are beneficiaries of Elumelu Foundation 2015 cohort. I started in Rwanda with the $5,000 the Elumelu Foundation gave us. Today, we just completed raising $3 million, and we're the biggest fast local foodstuff chain providers in the country. They started with $5,000, 2015. This is where they are today. That is one of the ways of bridging this inequality we preach about. Just little support, give them business education, create an enabling platform for their networking platform, and then prepare them for second stage funding and third stage funding that they need. We have over 60% of our population on the continent under the age of 30. We must prioritize them. We must think about them. We cannot be talking about developing our continent without dealing with this sector. So to me, the inequality or the inefficiency we have in resource allocation in the system can only be addressed if we begin to prioritize these people. And when we prioritize them, we do all the things they need to succeed. We look at the tax laws, which is, by the way, one of the great things the Nigerian government just did. You look at the tax laws and these small and medium-scale enterprises, what do we need to support them with? Because inherent in some of those structural policies is the inefficiency we talk about that lead to the inequality. If we tax people at that level so much, they will not even be able to survive, to be able to be productive in the system. So we have seen, and this is what when I have platforms like this, I use the opportunity to call everyone, Friends of Africa, African leaders who are endowed. We must think of the fact that poverty anywhere is a threat to all of us everywhere. We must think of how to provide a platform, the enabling support that will enable people to move to the next level. We must think of our own future, our own prosperity in a sustainable fashion that lies in making sure everyone, as much as possible, is happy. You know, the scale of happiness might differ, but to some extent, let's bridge that gap. And the way to that is by making sure we empower the young ones on the continent. We believe that in the 21st century, the way we intervene in Africa must change. We should come together, make investments in infrastructure, and more importantly, investment in our young ones. That investment in our young ones will enable us create the future people that will help us bring prosperity sustainably to the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering whether we have a question from Slido. One question. No? Okay. Well, then I have another question. And if you don't mind, this is both to Mr. Reed and Ms. Allen. It's a loaded question, but I'd really appreciate your short answers in a minute each, which is, how can Africa accelerate its inclusion in the fourth industrial revolution? This is a loaded question, but I think it's a relevant question, especially from where you're both coming from.
I better start because you're going to have more to say on this than me. I think that Africa can be one of the leaders. The reason is that it can leapfrog. We've heard that term a lot, but it actually is true. When you think about Nick's area, I remember when Nigeria was putting out its cellular licenses, I think there were 120 landlines for a huge country, and people were making estimates that the entire industry would have 10 million subscribers in 10 years. Well, a little bit above that, right? Several hundred million. So the point is that when you are starting with a lower base in certain areas, all areas, credit cards, food delivery, supply chain management, inventory management, what we do every year at our CEO Day, the most popular topic is exactly that. And there is a lot of hunger among companies and entrepreneurs and CEOs, and a lot of intelligence and a lot of work being done. And I think you will see certain things coming out of Africa that even the UK can learn from. The flip side is, I was talking at lunch with various people who were telling me about various technologies here. They need to go to Africa, and people like us, all of us, have to make that possible. So I think when you think about mass poverty alleviation, also mass delivery of healthcare services, education, all of these things, electricity, we have to be in that world.
Excellent, I like that.
Yeah, and I suppose my short 1 minute answer would be that when I go around and meet many of the governments through Africa, I'd say the most important thing for us, we are a long-term investor. We're putting infrastructure into a country. So what we need is stability of policy. That is the most important thing. We know where we stand. If things move year to year, then our returns move, and therefore investors get nervous. So if you want an investment community that feels, I believe in Africa long-term, give us stability. I'd say secondly, understanding the need for spectrum to allow us to launch new services. It's so critical for us to have access to spectrum quickly to launch services. And then I'd say it's about collaboration between us as an industry and the governments and regulator, importantly, to provide a framework that encourages us to invest more, to basically expand into rural locations. We want to serve rural locations. Trouble is, it's challenging economically. So we need to find innovative models to be able to do that. And we want to build platforms. We see ourselves as a sector of sectors. We enable economic prosperity. So if we can get the telecom infrastructure right, the rest of the economy will start to progress going forward.
Thank you so much. I particularly enjoyed this panel. I hope everyone else has as well, because you're all speaking from the perspective of business people who have worked on the continent and with the continent for a very long time, which I hope is giving some confidence and reassurance to any investor in the room who's thinking of going to Africa. And you'd also be pleased to know that today Her Majesty's government announced that the government was launching a one-stop shop to support businesses who are looking to go into Africa. So for many of our panelists, when they ventured into Africa, perhaps that support didn't exist and you had to find your way yourselves. But there are new opportunities now for that to happen. So I want to say a very big thank you to all of you for exposing us to opportunity, real opportunity in Africa. Thank you very much. Join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you.
Runa,
Thanks. We'll see. Oh, this way.
You go this way?
We go this way.